Welcome to the American Printing House Breakout. If you're here for the session titled Know Your Audience, learning how your users without sight use technology and how you could optimize the experience for all, you are in the right place. My name is Lisa Milgram. I'm a volunteer with Sight Tech Global, and we're thrilled to have you here today. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to be hearing from Greg Stilson, the Senior Director of Global Innovation and Strategy at the American Printing House, and Joe Hodge, Software Quality Assurance Analyst at American Printing House. Before we begin, I just want to share a couple of housekeeping items. The session is being recorded and will be available post-event. So if you have to leave early or if you have a colleague that came in late, don't worry, we'll make sure this content is available. We ask that you please remain on mute. If you have a question, we're going to try to leave time for questions at the end. Please use the Q&A box. So when it comes time to ask those questions, we'll either pull them out or you can use the raise my hand feature found in the participants panel. If you're using a screen reader, the keyboard shortcuts are Option Y on Mac and Alt Y on PC. And that's all I have to say. I'm going to turn it over now to Greg and Joe.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And thanks everybody for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am so excited to be here today. This is going to be a fast and furious session. We are going to talk about a number of things, but this is really meant to be an introduction into understanding who your audience is and their different workflows. Because depending on who you're trying to reach, if you're a software developer, or if you're an app developer, a tester, any of those type of things, you're going to have users of varying, using different technology, using different features, using different things, and they're all going to be accessing your content in different ways. And so it's crucially important to really know who your audience is, know who the potential users that you're going to be reaching are, and how they're actually going to be interacting with your content. So today we're going to talk about the number one thing that I always say is accessibility is not enough. There's an entire concept of usability that goes along with that.
What is a screen reader?
What is a screen reader? So as I said, this is an introduction session. So what is a screen reader? For those of you who don't know what it is, we'll do a brief introduction into that.
Different ways blind and
low vision people
different ways blind and visually impaired users interact
with apps and websites using the screen readers and different
From Tim Sullivan to everyone. Link to common frustration points.
We'll talk about the common frustration points and do a couple demos just to demonstrate some very common, I would say, challenges that people who are blind or low vision encounter with different apps and websites on a daily basis. So who are we? I'm going to let Joe Hodge introduce himself, and then I'll introduce mine.
Hey everyone, good to be here today. My name is Joe Hodge. I've been at the American Printing House now for, oh my gosh, 4 years. It's felt shorter than that, but I do quality assurance. So I do a lot of testing with hardware and software. So as Greg mentioned, a lot of the different operating systems that we have out there, iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, I use all of them to test the APH apps and also do a little bit of software testing for the Braille note takers. So excited to kind of show you some demos today and be part of the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I'm Greg Stilson. I'm the head of global innovation here at the American Printing House. I've been here since January of this year. Was hired during the before the pandemic was a thing. And I'm a product manager by trade. I've been in the assistive technology industry for about 15 years, working on everything from hardware to software solutions for really solving problems. So
Slide 5. Who is APH?
Who are we? Who's APH? So the American Printing House for the Blind is a 163-year-old Louisville-based nonprofit.
Bullet provides
we are federally backed, federally funded by the federal government here, and we basically provide education resources for students and teachers of the visually impaired. And so,
federal quota funds enable students.
How does the federal quota fund system work? Well, basically, APH is the provider of anything related to solutions to help teach students who are blind and visually impaired, along with tools to assist the teachers who do the teaching as well. And so basically, APH is a resource that products can be purchased from using federal dollars that are provided to states based on their population of students with blind or who are blind or low vision. And our products, honestly, they range from the lowest tech to some pretty high tech stuff. So we sell Braille paper, for example. We sell slate and styluses, all the way up to refreshable Braille displays that can connect to mainstream devices and provide Braille that pops up on pins. So APH is one of the largest resources here in the United States and growing internationally, I will say as well. We have partners who are working with us to sell product around the world as well. So
Slide 6. Slide 6. Accessibility doesn't equal user.
so one of the main points that I want you to leave, if you leave with one thing today, is that accessibility does not equal usability. You can say that your app or your product is accessible, and putting things like alt text on graphics and things like that, or labeling buttons, does provide an accessible experience. The tools that a user are using or a user is using will be able to get the information, but whether the user can find that information in an efficient manner is a totally different ballgame. And the reason I
Bullet just
say
putting alt
that
text on
is
images. Bullet visual
because
workflows are.
visual workflows are very different than the workflows that users who have low vision or who are blind, the visual workflow is very different than their workflow.
Bullet make sure all web elements can be accessed by both a mouse or keyboard.
It's important to make sure that all the web elements, all the app elements that you're creating can be accessed by both a mouse or tapping or a keyboard, depending on the medium that you're using.
Bullet if using a touchscreen device, ensure the
Using a
accessibility flow makes sense.
touchscreen device, you need to make sure that the accessibility flow makes sense, because that we'll go through that in a little bit. But there are many pitfalls where you may have a fully accessible app, but the accessibility flow doesn't follow the flow that you as a developer want the user to follow.
Bullet use screen readers and work with testers with different
And I
workflows.
always say use screen readers, work with testers who are screen reader users who have different workflow usability or workflows that they use to access your content, and that can be of users who have any any disability or any using different tools that they use. So if you have a blind, or you have an audience that could be blind, you have an audience that could have motor impairments, make sure that you immerse yourself in those those use cases as well. So that you're going to have users who are using switches to access your content, or you're going to have users that use magnifiers to access your content, or screen readers, right? So I always say make sure you work with testers who are efficient in those tools.
Slide 7. Screen reader. Slide 7. Screen readers.
So what are screen readers? As I said, this is an introductory kind of presentation.
Bullet A screen reader takes text and other elements.
Is a tool that takes the text or other visual elements on screen and turns them into audio or Braille feedback.
Bullet screen readers are often pre-installed on many mainstream devices today.
Screen readers are often pre-installed on many mainstream devices
Bullet computers,
today.
Windows Narrator, Mac VoiceOver.
So some examples of that would be with computers. You look at Mac VoiceOver for Macs, or Narrator for Windows.
Bullet optional computer screen readers.
You have optional computer screen readers that can be installed, and those are for PC. You have NVDA and JAWS. NVDA is a free open source screen reader, and JAWS is one of the longest standing screen readers out there.
Bullet tablets and smartphones, iOS
With
VoiceOver,
tablets and
Android
smartphones, you have for iOS, you have the VoiceOver screen reader that's included on every iPhone or iOS device out there. And with Android devices, you have the TalkBack screen reader that's included on the vast majority of Android devices as well.
Bullet Smart TVS, LG, Samsung,
But
Sony.
it doesn't stop there. And this is why I always tell people that today, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, Joe and I are both blind users of technology, along with our with being a product manager and a quality assurance analyst. I always tell people today is one of the most exciting times to be a blind or low vision person because technology, people are thinking of inclusive design from the start of the creation of technology. And it's really exciting to be able to look at these type of devices or tools or entertainment devices that are there and know that, you know, when you open that device out or you take it out of the box, you as a blind user, as a low vision user, would be able to use it and get it set up. So what's exciting here is that it's not just computers or tablets or smartphones now, but it's smart TVs. I bought specifically an LG TV because it had a built-in screen reader on the TV that turned on the second that I set that TV up the first time. And that allows me to interact with the different apps that come on the TV, the menus, you know, that kind of thing.
Bullet media streaming devices. Apple TV,
Along
Amazon Fire TV.
with media streaming devices. So Apple TV, Fire TV, and
Bullet media streaming devices. Apple
and
TV, Amazon Fire TV, Chromecast.
So, you know, you look at those devices and the same screen readers apply. With Apple TV, you have VoiceOver. With Chromecast, you have TalkBack, and with Fire TV, you have the VoiceView screen reader that's included with all of those. So, it's not just computers and smartphones now, but it's screen readers are making their way onto a lot of home devices, which is extremely exciting. For both users, but also for content providers and app developers, because now you're expanding your reach of users, right? So you're not just limiting yourself to those who have vision, but your reach is growing.
Slide 8. Screen readers on computers. Bullet allow for
So if
screen
we
readers
look
on computers.
on screen readers on computers,
Bullet allow for full access of apps and
you know, the biggest thing that a screen reader does is it allows for full access of apps and websites using
bullet assuming sites and apps abide by.
just the keyboard of the computer. So Joe and I do not use the mouse. I'll go an entire day without using a mouse. But the screen readers allow, if the web developer or the app developer follows the general guidelines of accessibility.
Bullet WCA. Bullet assuming sites and apps abide.
That's the web accessibility.
Bullet WCAG.
Sorry, web
bullet
content
WCAG.
accessibility guidelines, which I'll put a link into this at the end. You know, those guidelines are ways of making sure that your content is readable by a screen reader, right? And it gives suggestions to ensuring that your workflows make sense, but it's not the be all end all. You still want to make sure that your content is usable by users and by making sure that the workflows make sense.
Bullet WCAG. Bullet uses custom keyboard commands to navigate.
Uses custom keyboard commands to navigate the content, right? So how do we navigate without a mouse? Well, the keyboard has special commands that allow the screen reader to get to content faster. You know, in the previous slide, I said that visual workflows are very different than workflows that a screen reader uses. And the reason being is because a sighted person, when they look at a screen,
2:13 p.m.
they see everything coming in all at once, right? And so a sighted person sees everything whole to part. What that means is that you see everything at once, and you have to narrow it down or filter what you want to see, right? And so an app designer, a web designer may put a giant add to cart button in the middle of the screen because that's what's going to draw your attention quickly, right? But a screen reader isn't going to land on that. It's going to land at wherever the default point in the website is going to be for it to land, or if you specifically draw the screen reader's focus to the element that you as an app developer want the user to see first. So if you want to work with the workflow and help to navigate that workflow, you would be able to control or help that workflow along. And so that whole part to whole and whole to part concept, a blind user sees things part to whole, meaning that I don't see everything at once. I have to go through element by element using the screen reader to really understand the layout of a website or an app. Now, we are given custom keyboard shortcuts to be able to navigate by headings or by form elements, or to jump to the search field immediately and skip over a lot of the stuff if we know what we're looking for. But in general, a blind or low vision user is navigating very linearly through the content
bullet shortcuts to jump to HTML elements
happening, right? So we do have content or shortcuts that allow us to jump from HTML element to HTML. So headings, lists,
from Lisa to all panelists,
tables,
15 min left.
Things like that. And so you're able to do that. Screen readers also really heavily depend on tab order. And that means that if you're filling out a form, for example, I know a lot of sighted people do this as well. As you're filling out a form, you type in, first name, tab, last name, tab, email address, tab. So you're not actually clicking a mouse. You're much more efficient because you're keeping your hands on the keyboard. But oftentimes what we see is that tab orders can get sort of out of whack. And so what's confusing is that a user may encounter a situation where it says first name, tab, email address, tab, city, tab, last name, right? And so that workflow gets completely jumbled up and the user doesn't understand where they are. They're saying, where's my last name field? Where's my home address field that they expect to see? But because the tab order or the accessibility order hasn't been looked at, it's creating a barrier at that point.
Slide 9. Screen readers on touchscreen. Slide 9.
Screen readers on touch screens rely on very similar type of content. So touch screen readers have the ability to jump from element to element. I can navigate an app by browsing through the headings or the controls or the buttons to make things a lot easier. But there's really two types of users who are blind or low vision who are blind or have low vision, that when they navigate a touchscreen, there's really two ways of doing it. They either swipe, because what happens is when you turn the screen reader on, your touchscreen now no longer works like a touchscreen does when a sighted person is using it. So tapping an icon, for example, doesn't activate that icon. Tapping that icon puts the screen reader focus on the icon, reads it, and then lets the user choose to interact with it. They can double tap to execute that icon or not. Having said that, users of touchscreens, there's really two different types of users. Those who swipe, and that means navigating from one element to the next.
Mateo Faso raised hand.
From the
Mateo Faso has lowered
entire screen element. So if they start in the top left corner, they'll navigate from that first element, swiping right to the next element, swiping right to the next element, to sort of build that part to whole layout understanding. Then you have the other users who are what I would say the explore by touchers. Those are the users who run their finger all over the screen to really grasp the understanding of where things are located spatially. And you as an app developer need to understand that those both types of users are there, and that you need to really understand both types of workflows at that point.
Slide 10. Screen readers on TVs.
Screen readers on TVs, just a brief overview there is that they use the TV remote in the same fashion to navigate around and read the content, but it does allow for all the menus and settings and apps, if the app is created with accessibility in mind, to be fully used.
Slide 11. Frustration points.
Some of the frustration points, and then we're going to jump right into demonstrations.
Unlabeled buttons.
Unlabeled buttons, images, and things that use graphics for buttons are one of the more common frustration points out there. I can tell you that almost every day I'll encounter an app that has unlabeled buttons.
Exclusive activities that require mouse action.
Exclusive activities that require a mouse click action or a down event action. And those are things that require you to physically tap or click on an element. The keyboard won't do it for you, unfortunately, and those are a huge roadblock at that point for a screen reader or a keyboard user.
Keyboard traps.
Keyboard traps are always a fun one. This is a situation that I know Joe's going to demonstrate here in a second. You get into a section of a website or an app and it never lets you out again. You have to do some backwards sort of workaround to get yourself back to a good starting point.
Use of images for buttons.
As I said, use of images for buttons. So not having an actual button element that says submit, but having a nice looking graphic that is your submit button. That doesn't actually say submit at all. It'll say graphic 275 or something like that. So at this point, I'm going to put up the contact information here. My contact is gstilson@aph.org. You can go to www.aph.org, and then we put the link for the web content accessibility guidelines if you are interested in that kind of in those guidelines as well. There's a ton of UX resources out there for accessibility elements, and I think, or accessibility design. But I think that, what I want to do today is really show you some of the downfalls of situations where accessibility may technically be there, but there's usability challenges. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Joe, who's going to share his screen, and he's going to walk you through that keyboard trap example.
Alt S, your screen share.
All right, so let's go ahead and share my screen here. And there we go.
Safari, Zoom.
Okay.
Safari, Amazon.com.
So I am
online
on
shopping for
Amazon.
electronics, apparel.
Let me quiet that down there. I am on Amazon's website here, the main Amazon page. So I'm going to just do a simple test that we all probably did recently, and that is I'm going to search for an item that I want to buy as a gift. And I'm going to show you how somewhat difficult that is with the Mac. So I'm using VoiceOver on the Mac, and I am just, as Greg mentioned earlier, I'm totally blind. So typically you would tab through a web page. So if you look at this as I'm a novice or I'm a beginning person, you would start at the top and either arrow or tab through. So if you press tab, you're going to go to elements such as links, web fields. If you're hitting the arrow keys, you're going to go sort of line by line and discover it in parts, as Greg mentioned. So with this here, I'm using VoiceOver on the bottom left. If you can see and you're not sort of used to hearing speech, you're going to actually be able to read what VoiceOver is saying as we do this. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to make this a little quicker, is I need to find the search field. So I'm going to turn quick navigation on.
Quick nav off.
It was on.
Quick nav on.
There we go. And now I'm going to turn the rotor, it's called. So I'm going to go to forms.
Words.
And I'm doing that by hitting up and left.
Characters, navigation, landmarks, web spots, form controls.
And now I'm going to just press the down arrow key.
All departments, search and pop, search text field, search.
And there's our search box. Now, if I started typing because QuickNav is on, it's actually going to, so for example, if I hit T here, it would try to look for a table because we have quick navigation on. So you're actually using first letter navigation. So T would jump you to table, H would jump you to heading, etc. So I'm going to turn that back off.
Quick nav off.
By hitting the left and right arrow key. And I'm going to type in Bose,
Bose
700.
700.
And I'm going to press enter.
700.
So
Bose 700.
There we go.
Insert.
So now
quick nav off.
I'm going to go ahead and turn
quick nav on.
Quick nav on. Now with the headings, I know that with Amazon, I could just, it's a heading level 2. So I'm going to press the number 2 on my keyboard.
Heading level 2. Sony WH-1000XM4 wireless industry leading noise canceling overhead headphones with mic for phone call.
So that's not it. That's actually Amazon's choice there. I have those already. So now I'm going to press the number 2 again.
Heading level 2, Bose noise canceling wireless Bluetooth headphones 700 with Alexa voice control, black.
And that's the one we want. So if from here, what we would normally want to do, and if you're sighted, you could probably see the price of these, because that's the next important thing. Like I'm not going to buy them if they're not on sale or there's not a good price on them. But watch what happens when I go to the next line.
Load, close, and 18 more items. Web dialog, close button.
So we got into something that we probably don't want to be in, but I'm going to just try again to hit the right arrow.
4.4 out of 5. 4.4 out of 5. 12,238 global ratings.
So we're looking at ratings, which is not what I want to be.
4.4 out, close.
So I'm going to hit left twice. So I'm going to hit close.
Press close, close, and 18 more items.
And then
dialog, close button.
Loads back up. So you can't get out of this. So Greg was mentioning a key trap earlier. That's exactly what this is.
Press close, close, and 18.
So the only way to get out of this is to actually go back. So I'm going to hit back.
Search text field, search.
And now I'm going to hit forward.
Close, and 18 more items. Web dialog,
and we're actually still in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back.
All depart, search text field. I'm just going to
quick nav off. Do the search over again.
Bose 700.
Now I'm going to show you how to get around
content.
So
quick nav on.
I'm going to hit the heading level 2 again.
Heading level 2. Sony heading level 2. Bose noise canceling wireless Bluetooth headphones 700.
I'm going to actually go one more past that.
Heading level 2. Bose soundbar 700 with Alexa voice control built in, black.
So we don't want the soundbar obviously, but what I'm going to do is now go backwards to the price.
Link image. Bose soundbar end of Amazon link. Ref equals ice under Amazon's choice. Amazon certified link. $289 new and used options from free shipping by Amazon end of get it at Saturday, December, get it as soon as Amazon Prime image link 330 end of 12 link $339.00 $379.00.
So as you could tell, I could do it, but it's a little bit crazy because if you're going down the page, like like a normal person would when they're first discovering this, like logic would tell you to do, you can get in that key trap, which is very frustrating to buy something at that point. So that's the way around that. But that shows you a little bit is if you were going element by element, you're going to get into that trap and can't get out of it. Where if you actually kind of, the only way to do that is to actually go past where you were navigating and then go backwards. So it's a little workaround, but it does work. But I just wanted to kind of demonstrate that and show you that. And now, with the little time we have
Zoom share toolbar
left,
window,
I'm
system
going to go
dialog,
ahead and
mute button,
stop
space.
sharing and let Greg show you a iPhone issue here.
Well, I actually just saw. I just looked at the time. We only have about 4 minutes left. So
Okay.
the example that I was quickly going to show was going to be on my kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old on their daycare app. There is an app that you can go in, and when you look at their profile or look at their day's activity, there's a messaging button, a calendar button, and a learning button or something like that. All three of those buttons are completely unlabeled, and it's probably one of the most common things that a blind user of mobile apps today encounters, is where you just simply hear button, button, button. That's it. And it's a guessing game to understand what those would be. So I want to pause, and I know this is fast and furious and an introduction, but I want to pause and take a few questions before we wrap up. But I definitely want to thank you all for your time.
Yes, definitely.
So Lisa, do we have any Q&As in the chat? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, we have a question from Glenn Marcus, who's asked, when designing a voiceover experience for mobile apps, I'm faced with choices to either 1, stay true to the visual layout, print, order, labels, granular elements, or 2, optimize to minimize the number of focused elements a no or low vision user has to navigate. When is it appropriate to favor optimizing over staying consistent with the visual UI?
So it's a really good question. I think that I've seen it done a couple different ways. One example is a fantasy football app that I use, and in the settings of the fantasy football app, this developer has chosen to create an optional home screen layout of the app that is a list view rather than I think what you're kind of describing is really a visually appealing kind of structured layout view. And you can do both. I think he saw it as, and I had worked with him on the development of the process or of the app, that he found it better that some users who are sighted may want a less cluttered view or a less visually stimulating view or something like that. And so what he did is created a list view of all the elements that you can go through, and you can go one by one really, really quickly. It creates a different workflow, but it's also a workflow that he found was beneficial for both sighted and blind user. It was sort of less, like I said, less stimulating or less visually stimulating for some users that didn't want that. But it really worked well with VoiceOver or with a screen reader. And that's just a setting that he changed in the accessibility settings of his app. So it's really up to you. But I think it's also really important that you work with users to identify what he found is that as an app that caters obviously to the primary being sighted users, he found that there was a value to provide that for some of those users as well as the standard view. I hope that helps.
And Glenn has a follow-up. If I keep one visual UI for all users, is it appropriate to have a different screen reader UX?
You know what? I think it is, and it's one of these things that your user can. This is only really something that you can determine by testing with users, right? And so, if a user tells you that the UI that you're using visually is just not working when you have the content labeled, in a certain way, and it's not making sense, then I don't see a problem with you creating a UX that caters to a screen reader workflow.
And one of the cool things that you can do with iOS and Android, I believe Android can do this too, is you can detect if a screen reader is running. And so when your app launches, it would just automatically switch into that UX where the screen reader person is taking advantage of that.
And we actually had one more question from Mike Silverman, who said, great presentation. What do you guys do when you run into an app that's not accessible? Do you reach out to the company, developer?
Yes.
Yes.
To answer your question, yes. Especially, apps that I can tell you that as a parent now, there's certain apps that have become crucial. I've used smart thermometers now and things like that, right? So things that I really find valuable, I'll reach out to the developer immediately. Like I said, that fantasy football app, I'm not not going to put that on the same level as like a smart thermometer, but for my own workflow, I'm in a fantasy football league that uses this specific app. I didn't want to have to use a different app or a different experience, so I reached out to the developer, and the developer was super receptive of my situation, and he saw it as somebody or as a way to improve his app and to improve his experience for all users. So yes, we reach out to the app developers. There are workaround tools in the mobile devices today to try to compensate for apps that don't take accessibility into account. But I would say those are plan B, C, and D options. It's never even remotely as good as having the accessibility built in from the start. And if you
And
want to
just real
check out, oh,
fast,
go ahead, Joe.
just adding on to that real fast, one thing I've found that's really useful is taking a screen video and doing actual just showing the issue happening. So like Greg was mentioning with the daycare app, if it's just a spot where there's 4 enabled buttons, you're able to create an account, you're able to do everything else, show those 4 enabled buttons and point it out to the developer and just say, hey, this would make my life so much easier. And here's why. That goes a long way, just actually pointing out the flaws so they're not having to go find them themselves if they've never dealt with accessibility. So
Absolutely, and I think that as app developers or as folks who are looking at creating content for populations, it's really good to jump into the accessibility settings of whatever platform you're developing, because we live in an age now where that's a thing, right? Like on every platform that you're developing on, pretty much, there's going to be an accessibility option where you can turn on screen readers, you can invert colors, you can use a screen magnifier. Learn what tools are available and how that can make your population grow to really reach populations that you never thought you were reaching before. So with that, I know, Lisa, we're running up on time. I do want to thank everybody for your time. And please reach out, gstilson@aph.org, gstilson@aph.org. And if we didn't get to your questions, please shoot them our way.
Yep, and I just wanted to share, this wasn't a question, but I thought it was a nice way to end, from Kristen Chavez, who said, I don't have a question, but I want to thank you. I'm a sighted individual who works with a student who's visually impaired, and I really appreciate the information you provided. It was enlightening and beneficial as I move forward. So
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for attending.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.